What happens when the future doesn't look bright, but burned out, crumbling, and barely holding together? In the 1970s, filmmakers gave us visions of humanity stumbling through deserts, domes, and ruined cities. These weren't hopeful bedtime stories, they were warnings wrapped in wild adventures. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to watch society crack apart on screen? Stick around, because the answers will be stranger than you think. The Omega Man, 1971. Step into a Los Angeles that feels more like an abandoned tomb than a city. The Omega Man throws you right into a world where nearly everyone is gone, and the streets belong to eerie, cloaked figures who only come out at night. Charlton Heston plays one of the last normal survivors, cruising empty boulevards in a convertible while dodging an army of infected zealots who want him gone. The hook here isn't just the creepy atmosphere, it's the way the movie captures loneliness. There are long stretches where Heston talks to mannequins or mutters to himself as if the city might suddenly answer back. It's unsettling, and it makes you think, what would you say if you were the last one left? The film taps into 1970s paranoia about technology, experiments gone wrong, and a future where humanity sabotages itself. It's also loud, colorful, and unapologetically of its time. Some of the costumes might make you laugh, but the mood they create lingers. The kicker is how the movie sets the stage for future lone survivor epics. Without The Omega Man, you probably wouldn't have I Am Legend decades later. It's messy, dated, but essential, a snapshot of how 70s sci-fi wrestled with collapse and fear of the unknown. Logan's Run, 1976. Imagine a society where the ultimate rule isn't about money, power, or politics, it's about your age. In Logan's Run, everyone lives in a domed city of pleasure, but at 30, you're expected to renew. That's the polite word. What it really means is, no one makes it past 30. Michael York stars as Logan, a Sandman whose job is to track down people who run from this fate. But when his turn comes closer, Logan starts questioning everything. What's beyond the dome? Why does life have to end so soon? The movie sends him on a journey that reveals a crumbling world outside, overrun by nature and silence. This is 70s sci-fi at its most stylish. Glowing costumes, neon lights, and special effects that scream retro cool. But under the surface, it's all about control. The film asks what happens when a society looks perfect on the outside, but is built on an expiration date. Watching it now, you'll catch echoes of modern dystopias, from The Hunger Games to The Matrix. Yet Logan's Run still holds its own, not because of slick effects, but because of its bold idea. Eternal youth isn't paradise if it comes with a countdown clock. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. Dark humor, scorched earth, and a telepathic dog. That's the bizarre cocktail A Boy and His Dog serves up. The story follows Vic, a teenager navigating a wasteland after global collapse, and his dog Blood, who happens to talk directly into his mind. Together, they scavenge for food, shelter, and scraps of civilization. But here's the twist. While the landscape looks brutal, it's the human behavior that really unsettles you. People have twisted their morals to survive, and Vic constantly teeters between desperation and corruption. The dog, oddly enough, is the conscience, sharp, witty, and far more rational than his human partner. This film doesn't give you grand battles or huge special effects. Instead, it paints survival as ugly, awkward, and sometimes darkly funny. The satire cuts deep. It's a portrait of how quickly people can lose their way when the rules vanish. What makes it unforgettable is the odd partnership between boy and dog. Their banter keeps things moving, but it also asks whether loyalty and companionship can survive in a place where humanity feels stripped away. It's not for everyone, but if you want a cult classic that takes the apocalypse less seriously than usual, this one digs in. Damnation Alley, 1977. What if the entire landscape looked like a bad acid dream? Damnation Alley drops you into a post-nuclear world of radioactive deserts, giant insects, and a small team traveling across the ruins of America in a massive, armored vehicle called the Landmaster. It's a road trip movie with a deadly twist. The survivors, played by Jan Michael Vincent and George Peppard, aren't just trying to reach safety, they're fighting through storms, mutant creatures, and the crushing emptiness of what's left. The vehicle itself becomes the star, a rolling fortress with wheels that can climb rocks, cross rivers, and survive almost anything. The movie was notoriously troubled in production, with budget issues and chaotic effects work. Yet there's something oddly charming about how rough it feels. The special effects, by today's standards, look clunky, but in the 70s, they were ambitious. The film leans hard into spectacle, showing you a vision of Earth turned hostile against its own people. At its core, Damnation Alley is about persistence. The world has turned sour, but the survivors keep driving, keep pushing forward, even when hope feels like a mirage. It's messy, it's uneven, but it captures the spirit of the era. Humanity refusing to quit, even when the road looks endless. The Ultimate Warrior, 1975. Set in a crumbling New York after famine and disease, The Ultimate Warrior imagines a city turned into fortress-like enclaves, each led by desperate leaders trying to cling to power. Max von Sydow plays a weary ruler of one such enclave, holding out against collapse. When everything seems lost, he hires a lone fighter, played by Yul Brynner, to protect a seed bank that could restart agriculture. The stakes are huge, but the movie feels intimate. Most of the drama happens in alleys, rooftops, and close-quarter battles for survival. It's less about giant special effects and more about the raw tension of defending the last hope of food against gangs and chaos. Brynner brings a stoic, almost mythic presence, a man who doesn't waste words but lets his actions speak. Von Sydow plays the opposite, a leader who knows time is slipping away but still clings to one fragile dream, a future where crops grow again. This film hits harder now than it did in the 70s. With themes of famine, community breakdown, and the fight to preserve knowledge, it feels startlingly relevant. It's gritty, low budget, but packed with intensity. Watching it, you realize the apocalypse doesn't always roar in explosions. Sometimes it starves you slowly, forcing people to fight for the tiniest chance at tomorrow. Ravagers, 1979. Some apocalypse movies show us a bombed-out wasteland. Others show us famine. Ravagers gives you gangs of marauders roaming what's left of America, scavenging and terrorizing anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. Richard Harris stars as a lone drifter, haunted by the destruction of his wife and home, wandering through landscapes of ruins and violence. The movie has a raw, stripped-down quality. Unlike big-budget spectacle, Ravagers leans into grit. Buildings look half-collapsed, survivors cling to scraps of order, and the drifter becomes a reluctant protector for those who still dream of something better. There's a hidden community rumored to exist, a place where civilization might still hold on, and that dangling hope drives the story. What makes Ravagers interesting is how it blends nihilism with glimmers of possibility. It's not a cheerful watch, but it forces you to ask, after everything burns, does rebuilding mean starting fresh or simply repeating the same mistakes? Harris brings weary gravitas, while the supporting cast adds texture to a world teetering on the edge of chaos. This isn't the most polished entry in 70s sci-fi, but it earns its place because of the way it taps into a primal fear that when the rules vanish, people become the real monsters. Quintet, 1979. Robert Altman wasn't known for sci-fi, but when he tackled it, he made something hauntingly unique. Quintet imagines a world frozen by endless ice, where survivors live in abandoned cities and distract themselves with a mysterious board game called Quintet. Paul Newman stars as a drifter who gets caught in a deadly version of the game, where losing means more than just points. The movie is slow, dreamlike, and bleak. Altman fills every frame with frost, desolation, and silence. The characters wear heavy furs, their breath visible as they shuffle through ruins of modernity swallowed by snow. The board game becomes a metaphor for survival itself, where players form alliances only to betray each other, mirroring the desperation of a dying world. Viewers either love or hate Quintet. It's not action-packed, but it hypnotizes you with atmosphere. Imagine watching chess played with lives on the line, all set against the backdrop of extinction. Newman's quiet intensity carries the film, giving it a weight that sticks in your mind long after the credits roll. In the end, Quintet is less about spectacle and more about mood, a meditation on how humanity clings to ritual even when the world has turned to ice. Mad Max, 1979. Before the explosions, before Fury Road, there was a lean, gritty film from Australia that set the stage for decades of apocalyptic cinema. Mad Max isn't yet the desert epic of later sequels. Instead, it shows the world just before the total collapse, a society fraying at the edges, where lawmen battle biker gangs in a landscape of dusty highways and dwindling order. Mel Gibson, still early in his career, plays Max Rokitansky, a cop pushed to the brink by chaos. The film builds slow, showing us a crumbling system where violence spreads like wildfire. By the time Max is personally shattered, his transformation into a hardened survivor feels inevitable. What makes Mad Max unforgettable is its raw energy. Shot on a shoestring budget, director George Miller crafted high-octane chases and bone-rattling stunts that still impress today. You can feel the danger in every frame, as cars flip, roar, and crash with no digital tricks in sight. This is apocalypse in motion. Society hasn't collapsed completely, but it's close enough that every road feels like the end of the line. Watching it now, you see the DNA of almost every modern wasteland story, from video games to blockbusters. Mad Max wasn't just a movie. It was a spark that lit an entire genre. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. 1972. The Planet of the Apes series took a sharp turn in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, setting the stage for outright apocalypse. The film envisions a near-future Earth where apes have become enslaved by humans, trained to do menial tasks. Into this world steps Caesar, the intelligent offspring of previous ape characters, who slowly realizes he has the power to lead an uprising. This is not subtle storytelling. The imagery of apes being mistreated by humans is meant to sting, tapping into fears of rebellion, oppression, and payback. The film builds toward a full-scale revolt, with scenes of fire and chaos erupting across the city. It's both thrilling and unsettling, a reminder of how quickly control can flip. What makes Conquest stand out is the way it reshaped the series. Instead of time travel puzzles or philosophical debates, it gave us an origin story for how humanity could lose the planet. Roddy McDowall, under heavy makeup, delivers a performance that feels both passionate and tragic, turning Caesar into a symbol of revolution. The ending remains one of the boldest of the 70s franchise, reminding viewers that apocalyptic change doesn't always come from outside forces. Sometimes it's born from the cruelty we create ourselves. Battle for the Planet of the Apes, 1973. Following the chaos of Conquest, Battle for the Planet of the Apes delivers the uneasy aftermath. Here, apes have taken control, but peace is fragile. Caesar tries to build a society where apes and humans can coexist, yet conflict bubbles beneath the surface. Survivors of humanity's downfall still harbor resentment, and militant apes push for domination. The setting is smaller, forests, ruins, and simple villages, but the stakes feel huge. It's about whether cooperation is possible after destruction or whether war is the only language left. The film leans into parables about tolerance, leadership, and the dangers of repeating cycles of hate. While not the flashiest entry, it's surprisingly thoughtful. Watching Caesar struggle to hold a fragile community together feels relevant even now. Roddy McDowall once again anchors the story, his performance giving depth to the idea that rebuilding is harder than destroying. The final chapter of the original saga, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, ends the 70s run on a note that's part hopeful, part tragic. It leaves you wondering, after apocalypse, is harmony really possible, or is it just another fragile dream waiting to collapse? Beneath the Planet of the Apes, 1970. Sequels often feel like recycled leftovers, but Beneath the Planet of the Apes cranks up the weirdness and doubles down on the apocalypse. Picking up where the original left off, astronaut Brent searches for Taylor in a world where humans have regressed and apes rule with iron control. But the real shock comes when the story moves underground, into the ruins of New York. There, Brent discovers a strange society of mutated humans who worship a relic of destruction. They live in dark catacombs, chanting and clinging to rituals that feel as decayed as the ruins around them. The clash between ape soldiers above and these twisted survivors below turns the film into a powder keg. The visuals, ruined subway tunnels, scorched remains of modern civilization, hammer home the sense of a world past saving. Unlike the original's sly allegory, Beneath goes heavy, showing a future where humanity's last remnants cling to survival through delusion. It's messy, it's daring, and it cemented the Ape saga as more than a one-off hit. If the first film suggested humanity's downfall, this sequel showed the rubble up close. Watching it now, it's a bizarre but unforgettable portrait of collapse pushed to extremes. Glenn and Randa, 1971. Not all apocalypse films rely on spectacle. Glenn and Randa takes a stripped-down, intimate approach, following two young lovers wandering through the ruins of civilization after a nuclear war. There are no mutant armies or armored convoys here, just curiosity, confusion, and the awkward innocence of people born into destruction. The film moves slowly, showing abandoned highways, scattered junk, and quiet forests, reclaiming what humanity lost. Glenn dreams of reaching the legendary city he's heard about, while Randa follows, unsure if the quest will lead to truth or just another ruin. What makes this film striking is its low-budget honesty. Instead of dazzling effects, it gives you silence, long gazes, and the feeling of a civilization erased so completely that its survivors don't even understand what came before. It's haunting because it feels possible. What if the next generation grew up knowing nothing of skyscrapers, cars, or electricity, only stories and scraps? It's a film that slipped under the radar in the 70s, but for those who find it, Glenn and Randa lingers. It reminds you that the end of the world doesn't always explode, sometimes it just fades into forgetfulness. No Blade of Grass. 1970. When crops fail, so does civilization. That's the brutal premise of No Blade of Grass, a British take on apocalypse that feels unsettlingly close to home. A virus wipes out grasses and grains, triggering mass famine. As food disappears, so does order, leaving cities in chaos and families fleeing into the countryside for survival. The story follows John Custance, a man who tries to lead his family and friends to safety outside London. But as society collapses, desperation strips away morality. Every encounter with strangers becomes a test. Will they share, will they beg, or will they take? Unlike sci-fi epics with futuristic domes or mutant armies, this film feels almost documentary-like. Its horrors come not from monsters, but from people starving. Neighbors turn on neighbors, groups fracture, and violence sparks over scraps of bread. It's a grim watch, but it hits a nerve because it's grounded in something terrifyingly real, the fragility of food supply. Watching it in the 21st century, the warnings feel louder than ever. No Blade of Grass may not have flashy special effects, but it delivers a raw gut punch about how quickly society can unravel when dinner vanishes from the table. Phase 4, 1974. Most apocalyptic visions focus on humans destroying themselves. Phase 4 flips the script. What if nature decided it was done with us? In this eerie cult classic, ants suddenly develop collective intelligence, building strange geometric structures and waging war on humanity. Two scientists set up a desert lab to study them, only to find themselves outmatched at every turn. The movie is hypnotic, filled with close-up insect shots that turn tiny creatures into terrifying masterminds. The ants adapt, strategize, and force the humans into a corner. What begins as scientific observation becomes a desperate battle for survival against an enemy that doesn't negotiate, doesn't tire, and doesn't forget. What sets Phase 4 apart is its style. Director Saul Bass, known for his legendary title sequences, brought a surreal eye to the film. The imagery is geometric, unsettling, and strangely beautiful. It feels less like a monster movie and more like a nightmare about nature evolving beyond our control. By the end, it's clear the apocalypse doesn't always arrive in mushroom clouds. Sometimes it crawls on 6 legs, quiet and patient, until one day it looks you in the eye. The Crazies, 1973. George A. Romero, the mind behind Night of the Living Dead, turned his lens to another kind of collapse in The Crazies. This time, it's not zombies, but a mysterious outbreak that drives people into violent madness, spreading panic through a small Pennsylvania town. What makes The Crazies stand out is its tension between ordinary citizens and the authorities trying to contain the crisis. Soldiers roll in, suited up and shouting orders, while terrified townsfolk resist. The confusion feels real, as no one knows who to trust or how far the outbreak has spread. Romero was never subtle about social commentary, and here he delivers a grim look at how governments handle disaster, with force, secrecy, and blunders. The film blurs the line between who's more dangerous, the infected, or the ones trying to contain them. It's fast-paced, unsettling, and eerily prophetic. Watching it today, the chaos of quarantine and misinformation hits uncomfortably close. The Crazies may not have the budget of Hollywood blockbusters, but it nails the sense of a world unraveling from the inside out. So, there you have it. 15 visions of collapse from the 1970s, each one showing a different way the world could end. Some gave us mutant deserts, others frozen wastelands, and a few held up a mirror uncomfortably close to real life. Which one made you shiver the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more journeys into forgotten cinema. After all, the future may not be guaranteed, but the stories we tell about it are unforgettable.